Keeping up the momentum, uniting people, and forcing change. That's the major focus of tonight's Newsmaker. Frankie Gist was a community activist here in the Piedmont Triad long before George Floyd died. But what's happened since then has lit a fire under him. Recently, I spoke with him virtually from my home office.
Say his name! George Floyd!
People are tired. We are in a place where we just have zero tolerance for police brutality. We have zero tolerance for injustice. It's a lot of people in this world and in the local area that want everyone to have equal rights. So right now, people are tired, Neill.
I started activism when Trayvon Martin was killed.
But if Frankie Gist is physically tired, he doesn't show it.
All of y'all should be there for that family.
He's been front and center in just about all the recent protests in his hometown of Winston-Salem.
To be able to be a message to the community, to let y'all know that we gotta do better.
I met Gist for the first time about a year ago in the neighborhood where he grew up.
It's hard to be a young person growing up on this side of town in these streets because, that's all they see is guns and negativity.
I done had friends cry in my arms.
So positive messages and staying peaceful while pushing for change have been among his priorities while leading the recent demonstrations.
No mama is my mama.
He's even gotten his family involved. You see him here in the orange shirt lying on the ground for 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Across from him are his fiancée and son. Nonviolence has been a big theme for you locally. Why?
Because violence doesn't solve anything. It doesn't. I want the people in the world and in the city to look at the TV and say, hey, listen to what they're saying. Listen. Instead of saying, look how they're acting. The bottom line is, Neill, is that I tell people we cannot allow George Floyd to be the only reason why we come together as a community and as a people. We can't. Because if we do, we fail each other. We fail the people.
What are some other ways we can come together?
Well, we can come together by feeding the homeless together, by going into these troubled neighborhoods to help these families and mentor these kids together. We can set up voter registration together.
There's this big movement where people are saying defund the police. How do you feel about that?
I'm not really interested in, going against the police department. I get the movement.
Yeah.
I get the movement, but in certain areas, I just don't see the movement being necessary.
Right.
I feel like in Minnesota, that's necessary. I feel like in Atlanta, that's necessary. But in our city, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. The Winston-Salem Police Department has shown so much respect to us. When we doing our protests, they have treated us like kings and queens. They don't have attitudes. When you have a police department that's doing those type of things and the people can see that raise a lot of, positivity and relationship and trust and faith inside for each other.
Frankie, what has surprised you the most in leading all of these protests?
When the group of guys that's in different organizations of Bloods and Crips came to one of the marches and they tied their flags together and they dropped all their beef that day. That made my heart glad, and I knew there was hope for the world.
2 leading gangs.
4 leading gangs. 4 leading gangs tied their flags together and dropped all their beef in the city. And they said, we're going to walk behind this man and we're going to stand behind this man. And we're not going to allow this to be the only day we do this, but we're going to continue this unity forever. And to this day, Neill, they are still unifying with me and unifying together.
No justice! No peace!
As you know, we're so divided right now.
Yeah.
Passionately divided. What's going to be the key to bring people together?
Love. I've said that throughout these 2 weeks. Love is the only thing that's going to bring people together.
So how do we get there?
Love doesn't see color. Love doesn't see age. Love doesn't see what these people do on a day-to-day basis. What love sees is the heart. And the only way we can get there, Neill, is through leadership. Like myself, like you, showing love on others. Love is the only way we're going to have change in our communities and peace in our communities if we show love.
Frankie and I did talk about protesting during the pandemic. He told me masks are mandatory at his marches and he encourages social distancing, but it's really hard to socially distance during these events. He said he also wears a mask, but it's hard to speak loudly to large groups with a mask on, and that's about the only time he'll take his off. He also says most of those not wearing masks are either hot, have health reasons for not doing so, or have something to say, and that since the potentially life-saving change these protests are generating is so great, holding demonstrations during this health crisis is worth the risk. It's also important to point out the governor has said protests have First Amendment protections, which is why his executive orders have not been enforced during these events.